key VCF attended when not in charge, and there's still stuff that comes up we didn't expect. We always try to get fun speakers every year, and it gets harder and harder. This year we have to get some test codes. I'm 41, and those of us our age, 30s, 40s, grew up watching, not a lot of sources of information like you are today. So you got Byte magazine, store, and you watch Computer Chronicles on TV. And there was nothing I could say that was remotely as interesting as what Stewart has to say. So, Stewart Cheifet.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is takes me back to the good old days. Really homebrew type stuff here. And I feel right at home. Evan showed me a little bit of your collection of stuff. Great stuff here. Goes back before my time, actually. But it's pretty impressive. Nice to be with all you guys. I feel right at home here because I'm one of you, actually. And that's sort of how we started Computer Chronicles. Let me talk a little bit about the origins of doing the Computer Chronicles, which was kind of weird back in 1982 when we started, because there wasn't such thing as a computer show on television. And let me tell you how it all started, because it sort of was viral before anybody heard the word viral. I was a geek and interested in personal computers. I had my TRS-80 Model 1, and I was learning programming BASIC. And as Evan mentioned at the time, you had very few sources of information to help you figure all this stuff out. And of course, it was complicated at that time. And yeah, there was, I think, as he said, there was Byte magazine. And that was about it. And for most of us who weren't that skilled, Byte was a little over our heads sometimes. Evan showed me your little museum here. I have my own museum at home. Collected all the computers I've been playing with over the last 25 years or so. You name it, I sort of have it at home. I don't know what to do with it. My garage is a little museum. Some of them work, actually. One of my proudest possessions is the original laptop, the HP Portable, which still works, which was a brilliant design, but it never got anywhere. Other proud collections of mine, I have the old original video game consoles, the Fairchild, the Magnavox Odyssey. They still work, great fun. Another one of my proud possessions is the original optical encyclopedia that Gary Kildall's company developed when he was running a company called Knowledge Set, and it's on a Laserdisc. And I still have it, and I have a Laserdisc player. And it was really impressive. You could actually search the encyclopedia digitally. First time you could ever do that. At the time, if you wanted to find out what all this stuff was about and what worked, as I say, you really didn't have many places to go to except for a users group meeting. And I was in the Bay Area at the time. And fortunately, I was running a television station in Silicon Valley in San Mateo, California. So I would go to a couple of these user group meetings. And there'd be 17 guys in some basement somewhere, in some guy's house. And the information was fantastic. I mean, you couldn't find it anywhere else. And being a TV guy, I sat there and I thought, I've got to televise this user group meeting. I mean, have thousands of people get this information, not just 17 guys sitting in some guy's basement. And that was really the genesis of doing the show. Luckily, as I say, I was running a TV station at the time in the Silicon Valley area. So I didn't have to ask anybody's permission. I didn't have to raise any money. I just said, let's do it. And so we started in 1982, the first version of Computer Chronicles. And when it started, it was a live one-hour show. Can you imagine doing all the stuff live and all the things that didn't work? So it was quite an adventure. Now, I didn't actually host the first, that was just a local version. It was only on in the Bay Area. It was hosted by Jim Warren, who some of you may know, who started the West Coast Computer Fair. And we had no idea what we were doing. We thought a couple of geeks would be interested in this and nobody else. Well, word got around that there was this damn TV show that actually explained all this stuff, and how you fixed it, and how you got it to work, and what to buy and what not to buy. And during the course of that first year when we were doing that one-hour show, there was no internet at the time, but there were bulletin boards. And so the guys would get on their bulletin board and say, there's this show called Computer Chronicles, and it explains all this stuff. And we started getting called, the bulletin board guys all over the country started calling their local PBS TV stations saying, hey, we hear there's this TV show that explains this computer stuff. The TV station started calling me and saying, how can we get that program? So it really was a bootstrap thing. We never tried to solve, we had zero budget when we started this. No money, everybody volunteering. sort of like your group here. And next thing I knew, we seemed to have been doing something that somebody was interested in. The thing I liked about what we did, you know, learning about computers is learning about a process. So you can only get so much out of reading a magazine. You can read about it, but we can actually show doing stuff in real time and showing when it worked and when it didn't work and why it didn't work and how you fixed it and so on. So that was really how we all got started there. When we saw people were really interested in what we were doing, not just those of us who were geeks at the time, we said, well, maybe there's, you know, we should try to expand this. So we went out looking for money to actually make a real production value show. We didn't even record these shows. Unfortunately, we don't have that whole first year's worth of the stuff Jim Warren did. It was just a live show. We didn't have the budget to record it and keep it and all the rest of that stuff. So we started working on trying to make this a national show so more people could benefit from what we were doing. And of course, to do that, we had to go find some money. So let me tell you the first interesting story. So one target we thought was obviously this little new company called Apple Computer right down the street in Cupertino. So some of the guys who were working on the show went to meet with a couple of people at Apple. And they met with the product manager and the marketing manager and the all these different guys. And I thought, what a great idea. Sponsor this new computer show. And everybody said, yes, 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 yes. We got to take it to Jobs. So I want you to come to, they said to me, I want you to come to our board meeting. We've all recommended it. We told Steve to do this. And Steve wants to hear directly from you what you're going to do. So I was invited to this Apple board meeting. In walks this skinny punk of a kid, rude, who was Steve Jobs. And it's my turn to talk. And I never get to say 2 words. And Steve starts right away and says, well, tell me, on your show, are you going to show non-Apple products? I said, of course. I mean, you know, you don't own the world. There's all kinds of other cool things out there. Well, why should we pay to do a show in which you're going to promote our competition? I said, you take ads in magazines and tell them they can only cover Apple computers? He said, I think it's a pretty dumb idea. Rude punk. So I gave my spiel. I kept on talking. And this is a very interesting story because this is the genesis of something you're all familiar with. He said, well, rather than give you money, I'd rather just spend some money and buy a Super Bowl commercial. That was the origin of the 1984 Super Bowl commercial. They got the money and I didn't. But I gave them the idea. So we didn't do too well with Apple. And Steve and I never got along after that, actually. I had another encounter with him when he launched the Lisa a couple years later, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute, which was also unpleasant. Very. So we started looking elsewhere. Well, as opposed to Steve Jobs, who was rather obnoxious, there was a guy named Gary Kildall who was not obnoxious. It was a gentleman all the way, and really wasn't a businessman. He loved the whole computer thing and saw the benefits of explaining all this stuff to everybody. So eventually we got to have a meeting with Gary Kildall at Digital Research in Pacific Grove, California, about 100 miles from where our studio was. Got to tell you a funny story about that. So again, we met with some of the staff on Gary's company. And Gary finally said, why don't you guys come down to Pacific Grove, meet with me, and let's talk about how to do this. Well, he was 100 miles away. Now, Gary was a pilot, as you may know. He said, I'll tell you, I'll send a helicopter to pick you guys up. Sounds good. He said, why don't you go to the San Carlos airport, hang out in the lunchroom there, and my pilot will come in and look for you and take you to our offices. So we're standing, there was another guy who was doing the development with me, a guy named Greg Lascaris, and we're standing in the lunchroom at the San Carlos airport looking for the pilot. And no pilot is showing up. We're waiting and waiting. Did we make a mistake here? Finally, I see this woman sitting in the corner looking like she's looking for someone. I walked up and said, are you looking for a Computer Chronicles? Yes, I'm the pilot. My first lesson in sexism. I assumed it would be a guy. No, it was a very nice lady who got us in the chopper, flew us over to Digital Research. So we met with Gary, and I'm going to talk more about Gary because he's one of a kind. Unfortunately, was one of a kind. And we talked about, wanting support for this. He said, yeah, I'll give you some money. Now, he wasn't going to give us enough money, but he gave us enough money to start with. And then I said, you know, one other idea, Gary. You know, I'm thinking of hosting this show, but I'm a TV guy. I don't know as much as you do about computers. Would you consider co-hosting the show? He said, what a great idea. I've never done anything like that before. And this was, I want to really show you what a guy this was. He agreed to drive 100 miles each way every weekend, giving up one day, giving up his whole Saturday to do our show for no money because he believed in what we were doing. So this guy was a real gentleman. He not only committed money, he committed time, and it was actually kind of fun because Gary had made a lot of money, actually, even though he wasn't as successful as he'd hoped to be. And he had 2 Lamborghinis, which he would usually drive to the studio on a Saturday when we would shoot. So the big event for the crew was when the Lamborghini showed up. And they go out and take their pictures next to the Lamborghini and so on. So that was kind of funny. Sometimes he actually flew up to San Mateo where we were because he was a pilot, as some of you may know. But he was a great guy and got to know him very well. We worked together for, I guess it was about 10 years. I do want to acknowledge another company besides, like I said, Gary gave us a little bit of sort of startup seed money. The company that really made the show possible in the first year was a company most people probably never heard of called Microfocus. Microfocus was a UK company. Fortunately, they had just gone public, so they had a lot of money sitting in the bank. And nobody had ever heard of them in the United States. And they gave us a big hunk of money to really start the show. So I'm forever indebted to the guys at Microfocus who really stepped up big time and allowed us to really start the show and launch it as a national program. Same thing happened when we launched the half-hour show as it happened when we were doing the 1-hour live show with Jim Warren. Guys got on their computers and were telling everybody about this show. And as I say, it was really viral before anybody used the word viral in this context. But we had no sale. Our budget really covered making the show. We did no sales, no promotion, no marketing, no nothing. But people kept on calling me up saying, well, here you got this damn computer show. Can we get it? And literally by just answering the phone, the show was on in 30 cities in about 2 months. And we thought, wow, I guess whatever we're doing, people are interested in. And the fact is, about 2 years later, it was on in 260 cities in the United States. It was on in 100 countries around the world. There were Spanish versions, French versions, Arabic versions. So the thing really took off because really nobody was doing at the time what we were doing. So it was really exciting. And none of us really appreciated when we started the show that there would be such tremendous interest in it. I mean, we had 1 million viewers a week doing this weird, geeky computer show. So we ran the show for 20 years. And unfortunately, at one point in the 90s, Gary decided to move his company to Austin, Texas. Running a business in the Bay Area is very expensive. Talent was very expensive. Real estate was very expensive. And Gary decided to move to Austin, Texas, and that meant he really couldn't easily come up to do our show every Saturday. He was really willing to fly from Pacific Grove, but not from Austin. So we had a bit of a dilemma with just me now, some 10 years into the show. And for a while, we experimented with different co-hosts taking Gary's place. We had George Morrow, I'll talk about in a little bit, Paul Schindler, Jan Lewis, Herb Lechner, a couple other people who sort of filled in. It was kind of awkward, though, because we'd have to teach every one of them what to do on the show. So a couple of months went by, and the staff said to me, Stu, why don't you just do it on your own? By now, you know enough. So I took over just hosting the show myself in about season 10 or whatever it was. So the origins of the show were really kind of exciting. It was really homebrew. It really came up of its own. It was not the result of anybody pitching or selling or using money. It's people thought this was really cool. And truth of the matter is, I was the audience. That's why I did the show. I wanted to meet these guys and find out how all this stuff worked and how you do it. So it was rather selfish, but it turned out rather unselfish in the end. I don't know how many of you know, because another show we started in 1996 called Net Café. And it was really the same idea as Computer Chronicles. This was, again, I guess 96, and the internet was just really becoming big, and the web was becoming big. And I remember going to one of the early cyber cafes, which was actually in Cambridge, Massachusetts, called Cybersmith. And I hung out there, and I had sort of the same experience I'd had with Chronicle. All these guys are talking about all these new websites and all these new tools and all these ways to do things. And what a waste, you know. Let's put this on television. So we started the second show called Internet Café. We actually changed the name after a while because of legal problems. So it became actually Cheifet's Net Café to make sure we weren't infringing on anybody's rights. And that was really a fun show. We introduced on that show almost all the big new things that happened on the internet. We had Sergey Brin on talking about this thing called Google, which nobody'd ever heard of. We had Jerry Yang talking about Yahoo. We had, who else did we have? Jeff Bezos talking about Amazon. We had the founders of IMDb. I mean, it was really cool to meet all these guys when all these things were just launching. And really helping the audience understand what's worth going to and what's not worth going to, because as you know, many of these early websites disappeared. So it was a lot of fun. The show was also amazingly successful. We ended up, again, a couple hundred cities all around the country, 100 markets around the world, blah, blah, blah. And we did that show for about 6 years. So I was pretty busy doing 2 shows every week for 20 years. I might mention, while we're talking internet, most people don't know this, but the Computer Chronicles was the first TV show ever to be streamed on the web. We worked with this outfit on the M-Bone, if anybody remembers that, working with these guys in Washington who were trying to figure out how to stream video on the web. So that was kind of exciting to do that. Let me talk a little bit about some of the, I mean, I could talk for hours about some of the weird, interesting things that happened on the show. We did like 600 shows over the 20-year period. But a couple of things that really stood out. So we were going to do a show on color printers. Color was a big thing now in printers because in the past it had been dot matrix or it was inkjet, but all black and white. And we'd heard that Xerox had just developed this color laser printer. And I happened to see some output from this printer. And it was spectacular. It was this, I don't remember what creature it was, but an ape of some sort with red and blue and yellow and green. And the output was something like I'd never seen before. I couldn't imagine this was coming out of a personal computer. So I said, let's get this guy on the show. I want to show off this incredible Xerox laser color printer. So we invite the guy, says, no problem, we'll come. And the thing shows up, it was the size of a Volkswagen. A big Volkswagen. Literally, it came in 2 parts on 2 different pallets. They had to plug it together in the studio. There were 3 engineers came along with the thing to try to get it to work. It was amazing. I think of it now when I hit print, you know, on my computer and think how this all started. So they spent literally, I think, 2 hours putting this thing together in the studio. Came the big moment. There was that print button. The guy pressed print. Smoke started coming out of his printer. Literally. I go, oh my God, what are we going to do now? We can fix it, don't worry. They like wired something backwards and blew the thing up. They eventually got it to work and it was spectacular. And that was the first really incredible quality color laser printer I'd ever seen. Let me tell you another couple funny stories that happened during the show. So we did a show on robotics. And you know, at the beginning of the show, we would do something we called the opening, some sort of cutesy thing to get people's attention. And so we had heard there was a robot that played ping pong. Sounded pretty cool to me, very visual. So we invited this guy to bring his ping pong robot into the studio and show us how it worked. And I was a pretty lousy ping pong player, but Gary was a pretty good ping pong player. So I said, Gary, you play the robot. So we set up the ping pong table in the studio, robot over here, Gary over here. Gary's going to serve. We flip the coin or something rather than the robot. Gary serves. The robot smashes this bullet right into Gary's crotch. Not good. Oh! We had to take a break for about a half hour. We readjusted the robot so it wasn't so fierce. So that was my introduction into robotics. Another funny moment, we had John Dvorak on the show, and this was an IBM introduction, I think it was the PS2, you know, this modular PC. Everybody was complaining that as soon as you bought a computer, it was out of date, you had to upgrade it, or you know, replace the board, you do this and that, which is really complicated for most people. So IBM sort of took the Lego mentality and built a sort of Lego PC, which everything was modular. You could literally unplug everything. So if you needed an upgrade of some sort, you just took out one module and plugged in the updated one. So John's just saying, this is so cool, watch, I'm going to show you I can take this computer all apart, take all the modules out, put them back in, turn it on and it'll work. It didn't. John's like, does this go here or does this go there? No, that one goes here. And he's messing around with all these damn modules, cannot get the computer to work. There's sweat coming off his brow, sweat coming off his forehead. Finally figured it out, got the thing to work, but that was one of those embarrassing moments. We're in the studio paying 13 guys on the crew by the hour, you know. And he's fussing. I said, come on, John, we got to get going. It's getting dark outside. Similar story on the software side. So we had Peter Norton on the show. And his first program, as you may recall, was Unerase. The brilliant thing that he told people, you know, when you delete something, you don't really delete it, you just delete the address. So he was going to show us how he said, we had this PC up there, and he said, watch, I'm going to delete everything on your hard drive, but I'm going to bring it all back. Sounds pretty cool to me. He deletes it all, but he can't bring it all back. And he's sweating again, just like Dvorak. I know I can do this. Well, eventually, an hour later, he got it figured out, and he showed us how Unerase really worked, and we got the thing going again. So keep in mind, this was, you know, cutting edge, bleeding edge stuff we had on the show. It was always the first time. And half the time it didn't work. And sitting around in the studio is very expensive when things aren't working. It was a classic line that every guy that came on the show said, it worked perfectly in the hotel room last night. Doesn't matter. Here's another funny thing that happened. So we did a show on operating systems. This was OS2 had just sort of come out. IBM's attempt at sort of owning the operating system. And we had a guy from Microsoft on who was talking about, I think it was Windows 1 at the time or whatever it was. And this is a great quote, which I have on tape. And the guy from Microsoft says, this is a temporary solution. Of course, the OS of the future is OS2. This is Microsoft talking. That didn't last very long. Just one other funny story. We did a show on speech synthesis. You know, that was a big thing at the time. Computers can now talk. And they got it down so well that certain game companies started making these talking dolls. You know, Barbie that you could have a conversation with. And he said, you know, how are you, Barbie? And Barbie said, I'm fine, how are you? And it was kind of cool. So we did this we went to a Toys R Us. There's this entire shelf full of these talking dolls. And we thought we'd sort of start the show by doing that. So I went over to this one doll, and I said, hello, Barbie, how are you? She says, I'm fine. The doll next door says, hi, how are you? I'm fine. And the doll next door, 50 of these damn dolls are all talking to each other, carrying on a conversation. I'd lost control. And of course, all the customers in the Toys R Us saying, what the hell is going on here? It was a very, very funny moment. Some of the, just the fun shows we did from my point of view were shows we did actually outside the United States. Obviously, computers were not just an American phenomenon at the time. So we traveled to all kinds of countries. Every year we would do some foreign show to see what was going on around the world. And gee, we went to France, Spain, Hong Kong, Israel, Germany, Monaco, Italy, Japan, Taiwan, Hungary, Czech Republic, etc. But one experience I'll never forget, we went to China to do a show. And again, this is 25, 30 years ago. And of course, when we walk into a country to go do a show, we have our camera, and we had a box full of 30 blank video cassettes, because that's what we shoot the show on. So we just get into land in Beijing, and we're going through customs, with this box of videotapes. Customs guy says, what's on those tapes? I said, nothing. You got to show it to me. I said, look, there's nothing on there. They're blank. I've never used them before. No, you might have pornography on there. You might have capitalist propaganda on there. I want to look at it. We spent 15 hours at the airport watching blank tapes. They finally let us in, but of course all our batteries were dead by now. And we couldn't go to work the next day because we had to charge all this stuff up. You never know what's going to happen. I'm very actually proud of one show we did back in 1991. Nobody had ever heard of it. We did a show in virtual reality. And that was quite a challenge back then. So I was really proud of the fact that we were kind of ahead of the curve in what's, you know, pretty hot topic right now. Other shows that were a lot of fun, I don't know if, not a lot of people watch them actually. We used to do this every year, a quiz show called the Computer Bowl, in which we had the tech guys from the West Coast against the tech guys from the East Coast to see who was smarter. And this was great fun because we had all the top people in the country, you know, would be on the panel. And I got to co-host the show several times with Bill Gates, with Andy Grove, with Mitch Caper. So it was really a lot of fun doing that show, meeting these smartest guys who were so competitive. Matter of fact, Gates was the most competitive of all. I mean, you don't want to play poker with Bill Gates. He doesn't allow for any cheating. Let me ask you a question. Of all the shows we did, what do you think is the most popular show we ever did by downloads? Any ideas? Commodore 64. There's been over almost 250,000 downloads of that show, which is 30 some years old now. It's amazing how vintage stuff really gets people going. Let me talk about getting Computer Chronicles on the Internet Archive, which is very important and very useful, which is why many people actually get to see the show now. So we put all our shows online for free. This was a difficult decision at the time. We had spent millions of dollars producing these shows. And well, let me tell you how it happened. So this was about 15th year of Chronicles. We had this gigantic library of the old shows on tape sitting on shelves, inaccessible. And when I was doing the Net Café show, I was going to interview Brewster Kahle, who had started the Internet Archive. So we did our interview, and after the interview was over, I sat down with Brewster and I said, maybe you have some ideas. I mean, you're in this archiving business. And of course, at that time, the Internet Archive was literally an archive of the Internet, pages. And I said, we have hundreds of hours of this. I mean, we own the video history of the personal computer revolution, but nobody can look at it. Is there any chance we could work out a way where we could create a video archive on the Internet Archive site so people could actually look at this stuff? Brewster said, well, I'll make a deal with you. If you provide it for nothing, we'll pay to digitize it all and put it online and host it. We won't charge you a nickel. My staff said, what are you out of your mind? You're going to give away all this intellectual property we have? But kind of as Gary Kildall thought 15 years earlier, I said, this is just a good idea. This is a good idea to share this stuff with the world. And we said, yeah. And so we gave all this stuff away, put it all online, not only viewable, but downloadable for free for non-commercial uses. And it took us 2 years to digitize all our video and get it online. And most people now, in fact, know us by the online archive collection rather than the TV show. And it's quite amazing the emails I get from people who watch the stuff online. And it astonishes me. I get emails from 17-year-old kids saying, wow, this is so cool. I never knew the history of this stuff. It was so much fun then. And I get emails from 70-year-old guys. Oh, man, it's great fun to relive those good old days. So we never imagined it, but the life of the shows on the internet has become really bigger than the original TV show in some ways. We gave it away, but for commercial purposes, we do actually are still in business of licensing the video from the shows for commercials and movies and things like that. So we got a little bit out of it. But it's really become this great online searchable archive of video covering everything that happened in the PC revolution. Let me talk a little bit about some of the people I worked with on the Computer Chronicles, because a lot of them are really worth noting. Let me talk about Gary first of all, Gary Kildall. I've already told you what a great man he was. And a very sad story. I don't know the story of Gary's demise, but it was, 1994, I guess. And he had already moved to Austin. He wasn't doing the show on a weekly basis anymore, but we were still in touch. And I happened to be, it was July or August, I think. I happened to be in England at the time, and I get a call from my producer, Gary's dead. I said, what? He's 52 years old. It's a horrible, horrible story. Gary had a tough time. I mean, he really never got over Bill Gates beating him out for the operating system for the PC. He was convinced this technology was superior. He had a graphical interface before Windows came out. He had the PC operating system before MS-DOS was put together as a sort of copycat. He was a great guy, creative guy, didn't let him get it down, but inside it really got him down. And he had trouble handling it. He divorced his wife eventually. He started eating a lot, got overweight. He started drinking a lot. And unfortunately, in that summer of 1994, he was back in California now, living near Monterey. And he went into a bar one Saturday night, got into an argument with some guy. Guy said, let's take it outside. Gary, in a drunken state, said, yeah. Walked outside. The guy socked Gary, knocked him to the ground, hit his head on the concrete, and he died. And an incredible, incredible loss. For no reason. And Gary left us. But he was really, I'll talk about Gates in a minute. He was the opposite of Gates. He was a terrible businessman. but he was a great technology guy, a great inventor, a great developer, a great designer, who really cared about what he was doing. He wasn't in it to make money. His actually wife ran the business side of DRI. But the great man, it was such a sad thing to lose him. Everybody always asks me about the famous IBM. Gary went flying when IBM came calling. Why did he screw up the IBM deal? There's many versions of the story. There's one we did actually a half-hour obit on Gary after he died. There's a version in there with a lot of people who were there at the beginning. I can only tell you what Gary told me. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but this is what Gary told me. Because one day I said to him, Gary, what the hell happened? He says, well, IBM called up. They said they wanted to meet with us on Saturday morning to talk about making a deal for CPM and the IBM. And Gary said, you know, today is my wife's birthday. And I promised her I would take her flying. And I'm not going to interrupt that. You guys can come on Monday. I did. He's putting us off. We're IBM. So then they spent the next couple of days putting together their counter strategy, which ended up being screwing Gary and screwing CPM and making this double deal in which they licensed both MS-DOS and CPM, but never telling Gary that they were going to sell MS-DOS for $40 and CPM for $240. Guess who won? So he really got screwed. That's why he was so bitter about Gates and about Microsoft. Really ruined the poor guy's life. But that's really what happened according to Gary anyhow. Let me talk about Gates for a second. I fortunately got to interview Gates many times and work with him and co-hosted computer bowls with him. People are surprised when I say, I really liked him. He was a good guy. Tough guy, super smart, but a gentleman, decent, always cooperated with us. I really respected him a lot. And as a manager, he was pretty smart. I'm going to tell you two things he told me, which, I was sort of a manager at the time running a TV station besides doing the computer show. That was my sort of sideline hobby. One day, Bill said, every week I'd have meetings with my senior managers, and they'd come up and they'd tell me, how's it going in their division? And they always gave me good news. This is great, and this is great. We're making money here, and this is on schedule, blah, blah, blah. He said, I got tired of hearing just good news. Because there must have been bad news around. So he made a rule. Everybody, for every good thing you tell them, you must tell them a bad thing. Now that's pretty insightful. He said, because it's the bad things that need my attention. The good things don't need my attention. I don't have to know about the good things. I have to know about the bad. That was brilliant from a manager, it occurred to me. I want to hear bad news. I force you to give me bad news. The other thing that really surprised me, keep in mind at this time, Microsoft and Gates were at the top of the world. I mean, everything was Microsoft. Bill Gates was the richest man, blah, blah, blah. And Gates said, every night when I go to bed, I sit there thinking, what have I forgotten? Where are we vulnerable? Who's going to take us on? And everybody, what are you, nuts? Who's going to take on Microsoft? And of course, he was right. They had vulnerabilities, and they got taken on. So he was a smart guy and a nice guy, really. I don't want to harp back again to Jobs, but there was a difference there. Some of the people who we had on the show, who co-hosted occasionally, one was another good guy named George Morrow, who developed, I guess, one of the earliest sort of suitcase portable computers. There was a very funny incident when actually George was on the show as a guest, not as a co-host. He was introducing his Pivot portable, but carryable anyhow. And it was really funny. This is, the Mac had just come out. 3.5-inch floppies were now the big thing. And here's George, very smart guy, comes up with this new portable computer with 5.25-inch floppy disks in it. He said, this is what people have software on. We don't ask people to change. He was so wrong. But again, the smartest guys can really make big mistakes. And he was one of them. I'll mention briefly Michael Dell, because in my mind, he's in the Steve Jobs category, jerk. Such a rude guy. I mean, it's just Dell. I mean, it's not the biggest deal in the world. I've never bought a Dell computer since then. It's not fair, but I carry grudges. On Jobs, let me tell you another incident when he introduced the Lisa. So he had a big news conference, introduced the Lisa in the Bay Area somewhere in Silicon Valley, and I was covering it because we were going to cover it on our show. And of course, the rumors all around were, why did he name it Lisa? It was actually that illegitimate daughter of his. That's a pretty fair question. So after it's all over, I walk up on stage and stand next to Steve and I say, a lot of people are talking about this. Is it really true? You named it after. He goes like this. He says, don't you ever ask me about that. That's not what this is about. And he really was about to sock me. We're going to get security up here. The guy was going to swing at me because I asked him a legitimate question. And I was right. Steve Jobs. As I mentioned, we had Sergey Brin on the show. Smart guy, really nice guy. Very impressed with him. This was before they went public, before anybody had ever heard of Google. The company wasn't worth $1 zillion yet. And Google, quite frankly, changed a lot when they went public. I mean, the do no evil thing always worries me when a company has to say do no evil. You would assume you're not going to do evil, right? You don't need that as your motto. They're a pretty neat company when they first started. When they went public and there were billions of dollars involved, they completely changed. And I'll give you one example. I'll tell you more about this in a minute, but I was working on a big project for NASA at the time through the Internet Archive. NASA had actually never contracted, outsourced a major task like this. NASA had a problem. They had 10,000 hours of video, all the experimental stuff they'd done, all the missions they had done. It was the most valuable collection you can imagine. And like my problem with Computer Chronicles, it was sitting on tapes on shelves. Nobody could see them. So somebody got the bright idea, we're going to make this stuff accessible to the public, especially as they were trying to keep Congress feeding them money. And so I was not only a computer geek, but a space geek, wannabe astronaut. And I would read these weird things online about NASA. And I saw one day we're looking for a partner to build an online website to show all our videos. Hey, we know how to do this. I was working with Internet Archive at the time. And so I replied, and we actually bid on this contract. There are about 20 companies, all larger than us. We are a nonprofit at Internet Archive. All bidding on to do this deal. And the 20 got narrowed down to 7 finalists, and we got invited to Washington to make a pitch before the NASA staff. And lo and behold, I got a phone call a couple of weeks. We picked you guys. Wow. So actually I spent the most fascinating 2 years working with NASA and getting all this stuff together and figuring out how to do this. It was very sad in a way. I visited all the 10 NASA centers around the country, and I would see this classic footage, most of it on film, literally in rusted cans sitting on shelves. I mean, it made me cry. They were so bad at taking care of this precious stuff they had. And fortunately, my job was to figure out how to get this stuff online, digitize it, so people could access this stuff. It didn't work out that well, unfortunately. We got the deal. I was so excited. But I didn't run the Internet Archive, and I took this to the board, and they didn't want to fund it. I said, this is a gigantic opportunity. And they wouldn't come up with the money we needed to meet the promises I had made to NASA. And we had a big falling out, and I quit, and I stopped doing the NASA thing. I actually then went on to start a new company, a startup called, with a parent company called Image Fortress. We started something called International Space Archives. We thought we'd go beyond that. We worked not only with NASA, but the European Space Program, the Russian Space Program, et cetera, the Japanese Space Program. But that was a rough go because there was so much pressure to bring in money. And I was asked to do things I thought were unethical. I had a really good relationship with NASA, and I was asked to do things I thought were not right. And so I stopped doing that. Other guys we had on the show were the good guys. Steve Case, who started Quantum Link and then AOL. And they're still out there in the world doing good stuff. I thought he was a nice guy. Wozniak, of course, a great guy. We had Adam Osborne on several times showing off his monster sewing machine portable. He was a really smart guy because he got out of hardware real fast and got into software. Another really interesting guy I got to meet was Jack Tramiel of Commodore and Atari. This guy was the total opposite of Silicon Valley. And of course, they were in Westchester, Pennsylvania here. They weren't in the Silicon Valley. Pure businessman, but super smart guy, bottom line guy. Unfortunately, didn't see the future enough to have Commodore and Atari survive. But what a character. I mean, unlike anybody I'd ever met that was in the computer business. Really interesting stuff. And of course, I met him because he was actually working with Gary, developing software products with digital research with their subset called Knowledge Set. Another interesting thing to mention is we would, often have tech industry CEOs on the show. I guess they wanted to be on television. And so they'd come up and be the guest on the show. The fascinating thing was they never knew how to work the products. The CEO would always come with some little techie hiding behind the bench here who could run this stuff. I was fascinated by the fact that the guys who owned the company, started the company, didn't know how to use the products. One other thing I should mention about the Silicon Valley culture. I used to really get a kick out of this. Every time you'd meet some CEO of a startup in Silicon Valley, what's your mission? To make the world a better place. Real reason? Make a lot of money fast. There was such hypocrisy in the Valley, frankly. But you had to say that to look at yourself in the mirror every morning. So why did we take Computer Chronicles off the air in 2002? Well, it's a complicated story. First of all, as you may recall, there was a real slump in the Silicon Valley around 2002. And so money wasn't as easy to come by. That was one issue. Computer business has changed quite a bit. Things were easier to use. People didn't need us as much as they did in the early days. It was 20 years later now, 2002. And also from a business point of view, we really owned the computer user market. We would say to an advertiser, you put a spot on our show, and 100% of the audience is a potential customer. You put a spot on some newscast or some primetime show, and 80% of the people don't give a damn about your product. So we really had a great sales pitch. That changed after 20 years when everybody had a computer. And it wasn't such a big deal that we were the only ones bringing real computer users to the audience. And the demographic changed, as I say. We just didn't have the advantage. So from a business point of view, it became very challenging. There were other reasons too. Not only was there sort of a lull in innovation at that time, I've been doing this for 20 years every week, and I was tired. And I need a break. I got to do something else. I can't spend the rest of my life doing this. And so we decided to take the show off the air. And we took both Chronicles and Net Café off the air at that time. And I remember having a meeting at the time with the guy who was the editor-in-chief of Macworld magazine. I can't remember his name at the time. But he said something very prescient to me, too. He said, when computers are like refrigerators, we're all going to lose our jobs. And he was right. When you just turn it on and go, you don't need us anymore. And you don't need computer magazines, you don't need TV shows. So that's sort of what happened. What's been happening since then? As I mentioned, after we took the show off the air, since I'd spent a lot of time developing this video archive on the Internet Archive for video content, which they had never done before, we sort of figured out how to do this. So Brewster came to me after we were done with the Chronicles collection and the Net Café collection. He said, would you help us do this with other television programs, with other video collections? And it sounded kind of fun, and I was interested in really moving out of the analog television world into the digital online world. So we spent a couple of years working on that, and that's how I got involved in the NASA project. The NASA thing was so incredibly cool. I was so disappointed that I couldn't get the board support, but I learned that the board of the Internet Archive wasn't that smart. Not only did they turn down the NASA project, but let me tell you the YouTube story. So we had this collection online. We were the first. Internet Archive had this incredibly poorly named thing called open source video, YouTube. But we called it open source video. Terrible front end, terrible website, but a great idea. By this time, storage costs had gone down, bandwidth costs had gone down, and it really wasn't that expensive to put all this stuff online. And I thought there was a future here, so I went again to the board of archive. I said, we have something really cool here. We're telling people for nothing, you can upload anything you want in video. We'll host it at no cost, no gateways. We're not telling you what you can do and what you can't do. And the board said to me, how are you going to make money just showing people's amateur videos? And I said, trust me. They didn't. And it was about a year later, YouTube started and then got sold to Google for $1.6 billion. That was a bad day. So in a lot of cases I was right and they were wrong, but I didn't always win. After all of that, my experience with working with Image Fortress and the International Space Archives was so tough running a for-profit startup. I really was sick and tired of the race for money. So I went to academia instead, and I became a professor of journalism at the University of Nevada for a couple of years. And since then, I've been doing freelance stuff, really a lot of work in the healthcare field right now. I wanted to actually start a show called Healthcare Chronicles, because the application of technology to healthcare is so hot right now and so fascinating and so interesting. I remember we had, on one of our Chronicle shows, we had a woman from IBM on showing us how they built a virtual heart in software. So good that they can actually test virtual drugs on the virtual heart and see what would happen. And this is amazing. All the simulations they were doing with robot patients. I was never successful in getting that on the air, but It was a great interest of mine. We constantly think about relaunching Chronicles. I get emails every single day saying, why did you bring the show back, bring the show back? And I think about it, there's so many copycat shows now on the web. I mean, there's 100 of these little Computer Chronicles lookalike shows. And our show was very expensive. I mean, if some guy sits in his garage and here's a new toy, and it's pretty cheap to do. I mean, we had a staff of 12 people. We had all the top guys in the country. It was a complicated show. So we still haven't sort of crossed that bridge yet and said bring the show back, though people are asking me every single day to do that. So I'm back to being one of you guys. Just a geek, loving my toys, loving playing with all this stuff, and having a lot of fun. I'm really interested in virtual reality. Got a chance to play with the Oculus Rift quite a bit, and I love this stuff. Interested in self-driving cars. Obviously, incredible stuff that's going on mobile. So I'm just having fun again and not worrying about having to do a TV show every week. I do have a Twitter account in case you guys want to follow me. I post weird tech stories a couple times a week at Cheifet. We are still in the business of licensing Computer Chronicles footage. My name, at Cheifet. Yeah. We are in the business of licensing footage. It amazes me that people are interested in this. So, I mean, matter of fact, we licensed some stuff in one of the Steve Jobs movies. A lot of documentaries use our stuff. One thing I should mention before, I think my time is probably up. I just spent 3 hours being interviewed by CNN for their series on the 80s. They're doing a special 2-hour special on tech in the 80s. This is right up our alley. And it's going to be on Thursday, April 28th from 9 to 11 p.m. And we provided a lot of footage to that show. Obviously, we had the video from that era. So if you guys want to watch that, it might be. I don't know if they're going to use anything of me, but we spent 3 hours talking about it. So that would be a lot of fun. So that's sort of the brief history of what we've done, what I've done. And I'm still like a kid. I love this stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You think 15 minutes of questions?
Absolutely.
So 15 minutes or so of Q&A, and then we'll need some announcements and open the show.
Yes.
Did you ever do an episode of Chuck Metal?
No. A lot of you guys go back farther than I do. We were really, focused on really consumer type stuff. So we didn't get into a lot of this heavier stuff. And I saw some of your collection here. We were personal computers, and it was a video magazine show basically to help people make consumer decisions. So we didn't get into a lot of the sort of big time stuff, the older stuff. No, we didn't, I'm afraid. Yeah.
So I really enjoyed your talk, and you have a lot of stories. Do you ever think of either putting them in a book or making your own documentary of the Computer Chronicles?
Think about it all the time. We actually had an idea for a book called 20 Years on the Bleeding Edge. We have so many great stories to tell. Yeah, I think about it. We've talked to a couple of publishers about it. I haven't thought about the documentary. What we have thought about actually is putting together, we once did this for a trade show, sort of great moments on the Chronicles in video. Somewhere sitting on the shelf is a tape of a lot of these funny moments I talked to you about to show people this stuff. I haven't gotten that far yet. I guess the audience is still there for a book. Yeah. Pardon? Yeah, well, I actually thought about Kickstarter for relaunching Chronicles. I wasn't sure that was a good idea, but we're thinking about that too. Yeah, fortunately, I don't know if you remember, but at the time I used to publish a weekly newsletter called the Cheifet Letter, which highlighted what we did every week in the show. So I've got a lot of data. I could pretty easily turn that into a book. Just got to wind myself up and get the energy to do that. What else? Yes? We certainly have stuff. I have my personal huge collection of PDAs and little things. I have the original HP, calculated HP, whatever, 1C or whatever it was. At home, I've got this huge collection of techie watches, about 50 of them, pre-Apple Watch. Every version of a PDA that was out there. So we did actually a show on some of the PDAs. Actually, we did some stuff on watches too. But again, we didn't dig that deep, frankly, because we were a television show. We had to find stuff that most people would be interested in. So we sort of went average consumer generally with the TV show. Sorry? Right. Yeah, exactly.
Was there any stories that were censored? That you guys told you can't talk about, can't do one here?
The closest we came, frankly, was dealing with Gary and Microsoft. Gary was so pissed at Microsoft and IBM that every time we were going to show off something that had to do with IBM or Microsoft, Gary said, "What about mine?" And so when we showed the Mac, we had to show Jem, Gary's graphical environment manager. When we showed any of the new digital stuff, we started this knowledge study group was doing a lot of CD-ROM stuff. Gary was the biggest pressure I had.
Yeah, advertisers say,
Never, because we wouldn't allow it. I mean, when we would meet with an advertiser saying, look, I wasn't going to go through Steve Jobs again, only show Apple products. I said, look, the deal is you sponsor the show. You have nothing to do with the editorial. That was tough sometimes. People didn't like that. And sometimes we said, bad things. But no, we absolutely had a wall between the sponsors and the show. Absolute, never bend on it. Yeah. What do you mean by serious? I think there is, simply based on the feedback I get. I mean, I don't know. I think things have changed. I mean, there's a lot of complicated stuff out there now. I think we're sort of back a bit the way we were in the 80s and 90s. Certainly in the whole mobile area. There's a lot of new stuff out there now. A lot of this stuff, because it is so much more complicated, it's a little hard to show on television. How am I going to do VR on television? So there's some real challenges, but I absolutely think so. I mean, just again, as a guy who's a consumer, yeah, I'd love to see the show again because I'd like to find out what's going on. So I say we think about it all the time, but we haven't got revved up to quite do it yet. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's going to take $1 million to relaunch the show. And the show would cost us about $100,000 a month to do. And I'm kind of tired of raising money. Somebody wants to give me a check for $1 million, show's on the air next week. Yeah. Favorite show? Probably the show we did on the Apple II. We had a lot of fun with that. We're trying to explain to people how the damn thing worked. We had actually built this virtual set in the studio, and we had this guy from Apple walking around, going from chip to chip to chip, showing actually what went on inside the computer and how all the data got fed from one step to another. That was really hard to do, but really fun and very popular, which, again, we use the benefits of television to visualize the process, which you can't read about. That was a show that was a lot of fun. We used to do a lot of shows on early days of MIDI music, which never worked. I mean, I'd walk into the studio and the crew would say, "What are we doing today?" And I'd say, "MIDI music." They'd say, "Oh my God, I'll never get home." Which was true. Yeah. We did do DEC a little bit very early on. In fact, we went to DEC and interviewed, what's his name? Yeah, Olson. It was an interesting story because, I mean, probably the story of DEC. I forget who the guy is, but somebody who worked for Ken Olson came into his office one day and said, "We got this thing called a personal computer. And we can do exactly what we're doing on minis right now on this little PC." And Ken said, "Why the hell would I want to do that?" And he kicked the guy out of his office. So we learned a lesson there. We did several shows in Boston at the Computer Museum there, which was basically an outgrowth of Ken's collection. So yeah, we did some stuff, but again, we were more focused on really personal computing stuff. We did several shows on history. History of the computer. The very first show we ever did was called From Mainframes to Minis to Micros, in which we went through the whole history and shot that up in Boston. But yeah, our focus was really, the first year was a little more academic, a little more background like that. In fact, on the first, we actually, I don't know if you know this, we did an academic version of the whole first season, co-hosted not by Gary or me, but by Herb Lechner of SRI, which was really used as part of course materials in early courses in Introduction to Personal Computers. That was pretty cool stuff. Yes?
Curious, I need to piggyback off of that sexism thing with the,
Okay.
with the pilot being a woman, obviously.
Yep.
But in your experience in your TV shows and life experience, were there any women on your show?
Absolutely.
And what kind of, obviously the minority I'm thinking, but I'm wondering if you have also any on today, if you see that it's like such a separated, there's such a gap in mostly why is
That has changed. That has changed a lot.
yeah.
I mean, there were many women CEOs at the time, many women developers, many women engineers, many women coders. Behind the scenes, there were a lot of women. You didn't see a lot of women out front, being sort of the spokespeople for their companies as much as you do now. But I remember working with, can't remember her name now, Carol something from, what the hell? No, this was, can't remember the name of the company right now. But there were a lot of women. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a fake story that there weren't really women involved in the computer industry, especially at the top end. I mean, we had Heidi Roizen, who headed up a software company. We did a whole show on women in computing. Remember, we had Adele Goldberg, who was with the Computer Manufacturing Association or something like that. Even today, obviously, it's more look around the room. I mean, it's more a guy kind of thing. But yes. So, I mean, we had a lot of women on the show. And, same as the guys. I mean, there just weren't as many of them at that time. I think there are a lot more. You walk around Silicon Valley now, walk into Apple or Google or anywhere, there's women all over the place. And in very high positions. And many of the startups are run by women now. So that has changed for the good quite a bit over the years. What else? Yeah.
The most interesting year, going back to the Computer Chronicles years. I've gone through a lot of years by year.
Yeah.
What is there a year that stands out to you as one of those?
Well, as having done 500-600 shows, that's a tough one. I would say certainly the very beginning. I mean, the first year or two when everything was brand new, that was kind of exciting for me. When we sort of morphed into the really more user-friendly world and got away from DOS and things that were really hard to play with, and got into Windows and the Mac, that was a lot of fun. And I liked the new toys. I mean, the graphic stuff, the sound stuff. I found that pretty interesting when we got away from just crunching data. So I think those two periods, very beginning, the first year or two, when we're really going through the whole history of how this happened, and then we morphed from textual stuff into music and video and so on. I think that was the most exciting for me. Anything else? Yeah. Okay.
I remember you did that show on artificial intelligence.
Right.
John McCarthy was on it.
Right.
I was wondering what he was like, or if you had any stories about it.
That's a funny story. Not only John McCarthy, but we had Ed Feigenbaum of Stanford on the show. This was the hardest show we ever did because these guys wouldn't shut up. It's a television show. We had 4 or 5 minute segments. Remember, I asked Feigenbaum a question. He went on for 20 minutes. I said, Ed, this is not a classroom. You're not lecturing right now. It's a TV show. We've got to go back and I ask you a question, you give me an answer. I ask you a question, you give me an answer. That's how it works. And same with these guys were brilliant, obviously, but they're used to being in a lecture hall at a university just going on and on for an hour. And it was really hard to train them not to do that. Same was true, frankly, with almost every guest we had on from a company who was selling a product. These guys were used to being at trade shows and doing an uncontrolled, unedited pitch for 20 minutes. And virtually every time they'd start out giving the pitch, I'd stop. This is not an opportunity for you to pitch your product. This is a chance for you to answer my questions representing the audience. And we always won. There was always a battle getting there because everybody was ready to sell this product. So we're not selling product, we're explaining technology. Yes? It's a long, sad story. I mean, think NASA, it's so cool. And so many smart people working there that they just never thought about all this incredible stuff. Not only was the video and film, but I spent my time touring the NASA sites. You think you guys have good junk here. They had hangars full of old stuff. I mean, spacecraft that didn't work, spacecraft that crashed, ideas that never panned out. I mean, I was like a kid in a toy shop going through all these places. And most people don't realize that the stuff works, only follows 10 versions of it that didn't work. I mean, they showed me the lunar lander that crashed the first time they tried to test it out. I mean, they have an incredible collection of stuff. I remember going to Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, looking at the handwritten notes of Wernher von Braun, saying, well, this rocket didn't work so well, we got to tweak this and tweak that. I mean, looking at his handwritten notes in his logbook. It was absolutely great stuff. And yeah, I was very, very disappointed we were never able to take that as far as I wanted. That deal kind of fell apart, I think, because frankly, I think I wasn't there to manage it, and the rest of the people at the archive weren't as passionate about it as I was. There's still some stuff online, basically stuff they grab, but the process of digitizing 50,000 hours of film and video is time-consuming and very costly. And NASA wasn't willing to pay for it. They were willing to, we didn't make any money from that deal. The deal was it was up to us. If we could figure out how to make money, great. We had the rights to use the material. They were going to pay us to do it. That was a challenge, yeah.
So, with the computer books, you have all these big guys with big egos. You had to have something going on. Yeah. What happened during it? There had to be some funny story.
Well, the funniest story was with Bill Gates. He did not like to lose. And I don't remember the particular question at the time, but there was some question. He was on the panel at the time, not co-hosting with me. And one of the guys from the East Coast team gave the answer, and according to the information I had, that was the right answer. Gates jumped, that's not the right answer. I've got the right answer. He was so competitive. That was the biggest hassle we, I think, ever had, was keeping Bill Gates under control. Yeah, there were lots of discussions, but he had the biggest ego of all, no question about it. And fierce competitor. Did him good, I guess, but you didn't get past things over Bill Gates. And he was smart. He knew a lot of stuff.
One more back there.
Yeah.
So, follow-up question
Favorite piece of technology? Well, that's a tough one. There's so many. I guess these days, two things. The internet. I remember the very first time I went online, CompuServe, with my TRS-80 Model 1. And you could see each letter print at a time. A 300 baud modem, I guess I had. But I remember looking, I said, this is like scuba diving. This is an entire world you can go into that I didn't know you could access before. So I thought just the initial idea of the web, again, it seems like scuba diving. It's the whole world you didn't know about you could get to. I'll tell you one funny story about that. I was working on another show actually in New York. We were editing a show. This was, again, early days. I just said CompuServe. And the editing went late. I was supposed to go back home that night. We had to stay another day, so I needed a hotel. Well, there was a hotel right across the street from the studio where we were editing. So I walked across the street. I said, I need room for tonight. He said, sorry, we're all sold out. I went back to the studio, logged on to whatever it was at the time, the hotel booking site for CompuServe, booked my hotel, walked across the street again and said, I have a reservation. And that made me realize that this virtual world was more powerful than the real world. That was a big moment. The other thing I would say is really mobile. When I first was able to access the web on my phone, wow, this is really big. And of course, it really was big.
iPhone or Android for you?
Both. Well, I like Android, but you kind of get into that whole iPhone thing. I just had to go with it because so many people have it, and it's pretty cool technology. But I still have my grudge against Apple, so I have to go with the competition sometimes. But I like them both, and I would say most techies I know actually prefer Android. Yeah, so I'm always torn there, but I got to pay for two phones.
So we're just about out of time. So sorry, Bill.
Yeah.
Not funny.
The Supreme Court frequently had CEOs showing up with their little techie in the back.
Right.
Did you ever have a CEO come through and try to do it himself?
Yep, and fail. They always started to try to do it themselves, got a big ego. And then it's, what do I press? Happened all the time.
Did you ever have anybody try to, for lack of a better word, bullshit their way through the show?
All of them. All of them. CEOs, VPs of marketing, bullshit. And as I felt like a professor at them, like, wait a minute, stop. This is not how we do this. This is not a trade show. It's my television show. And you're going to play by the rules. And they always came around. But it was like having to hit them over the head because they were so used to doing their 20-minute pitch. They understood they were talking to a million people, and they had to play by the rules. So we did solve that problem. Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously the incident with IBM executives in the phone saying that the phone signal is using the right step.
I don't have any personal knowledge of that, but based on the people I talked to and Gary's bitterness, that's true. Yeah, I mean, MS-DOS was not an original product, as everybody knows. It was a copycat product. Which,
But it wasn't Microsoft that did it.
of course.
Yeah.
But, which pissed off Gary too. I mean,
But Bill Gates had
I'm sure. I say Gates was at, interesting question, not to my knowledge, but maybe I should do that. Yeah, it's a really interesting story. No, there's so much mystery and so much bad stuff that went on at that time. And as I say, it led to the death of a great man.
We have to wrap up.
Thank you very much, guys. It's been fun.